Playing from Brian's iPad.
Oh, that's professional. Well, welcome back, everybody, to episode 8 of For Whom the Bell Tolls. I want to welcome everybody who's here live with us in the chat tonight. I want to welcome everybody who's watching us on replay. There's lots of you that watch us on replay every single week. So if you are watching on replay, please do leave a comment on where you are and when you are watching this, because I am making the May calendar For Whom the Bell Tolls, and I would like to be able to include some of you guys in different time zones as well. So welcome on in, everybody. I also wanted to say thank you to some of our new patrons that have joined our Patreon. If you're interested, that link is in the description, as well as we have some new merchandise in the BellTube store. The merchandise that nobody asked for and surely nobody needs. There's Rick Thunder merchandise, folks. So if you go to the homepage, you're going to find it there and a bunch of other cool stuff. Most importantly, I want to welcome our guest tonight. He is the author of the Hybrid Helix series, book 1 being Wistful Ascending. We're going to have some great times tonight. We're going to ask some powerful, impactful questions. So welcome on in to Joe JCM Byrne. How are you tonight, my friend?
I'm awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Brian. I really appreciate it. I've been excited all week to hear the bell toll for me.
The bell is tolling. We're also going to say hi to some of the folks in chat before we get too far down the road. We've got Britton from Some Okie Dude. He's got a great channel. One of our top Patreon members, Slay, is here. Slay, what time is it where you are? It is much later where Slay is. Ryan is here. If it isn't the most sarcastic man on Twitter, and Brian. See, that's the thing. Like, if you can outdo me for sarcasm by a mile the way that Joe Byrne does, that's pretty good. That's how you know you're a professional writer. Brent is here with us. Fantasy Book Critic blog is saying howdy. Former guest and current friend Darko is here. Hola, people.
Watched your interview with him. That was a great show.
Darko's so fantastic. Yeah. Evie is here. She's actually on time. Hi, Brian. Hi, Joe. Hi, Evie.
Well, we have to talk about the Spirit Cuts Through Water now.
We do. We do. It is interesting. I was watching somebody else's channel a minute ago before we went live, and that's what he was talking. It was actually Usman from Bards and Books.
Oh, yeah.
And Usman from Bards and Books was talking about that book. So I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, he did a series review of the first 3 Hybrid Helix.
Oh, very cool.
Which was very cool. Like the first one I had, I was very excited about that.
It's a great channel. You're flickering a little bit. I'm not sure if there's a setting. Seems better now.
I won't touch anything.
Daniel, it's still doing a little bit, but we'll see. Actually, what's happened is that Joe has developed some of the superpowers that are available in the Wistful Ascending, book, and he's actually moving at faster than light speed. You're only catching him here now there, but here's Daniel with Rick Thunder. That is a fact, Rick Thunder. CD287 says, yay, loved Wistful Ascending. Rob, hello from California. My parents are in California. Daniel Klaus is excited for Joe, too, especially if he's calling out Rick Thunder. Saw the merch, no one for the road, maybe the next batch. Heidi, that is an awesome question. There's actually 2 new designs that I think are coming next week. One is for the the one for the road design, and the other one is Once Upon a Time designs. So those are coming, and hopefully they'll be available by next week.
Brian, I'm going to switch webcams.
Okay, why don't you do that? I'll keep the chat going. We'll keep everybody entertained here for a minute. Evening all, can't stay, but wanted to pop in and say hi. That is Laura from Fantasy Awash. Laura, I don't know what you've got planned tonight that you can't stay, but I think you should stay. I think everybody in the chat's going to feel a little bad that you're not kidding. We love having you here. Okay. Bex is here. It's Joe. That means shenanigans. Very cool. And we've got Joe. How much of yourself did you put into Rohan? Well, since Joe's not here, Britton, I'll answer that question on his behalf. I put a lot of myself into Rohan when I was making that character, when I was writing that book that I didn't write. Yes, lots. I'm going to say it's about 73% me. Slay, it's 2 a.m. Yeah, that's what I thought. Philip Chase. The doctor of fantasy himself is joining us, of course. Hello, beautiful people. Joe's a little quiet. Yeah, oh, there's Joe again. I can add him back on. Guess who's back?
Can you hear me
Back
now?
again. Yep, I can hear you. I can see you.
Went to the backup webcam. I'm sorry about that. Technical difficulties.
Well, we had a question and I answered on your behalf.
Yes.
Somebody had asked, how much of yourself did you put into Rohan? And I answered on your behalf, 73%.
I put very little of Brian into Rohan, to be honest, because I
Yeah.
hadn't met him. I
Right.
didn't know Brian existed when I first wrote the character because we're in Minnesota and I'm in New York, and that's just the way the cookie crumbles.
That's
How much of myself, Rohan? I don't know. That's a great question. It's a weird question. Rohan is a lot like me if I had infinite time to come up with responses to things.
exactly.
You're in a situation and you know something happens and you're like you don't have the right comeback, especially when you're younger. And then you're like 2 days later, you're like, oh, I should have said this, and that would have been a zinger. And that's an error, but you didn't. But when you write, it's great because you can come up with it 2 days later and you can just write it in that scene, and you time traveling in effect, right? So you can always write characters who are smarter than you because they can always do everything faster.
Absolutely. They have those extra few days to think of that great comeback line. Well, you look good now. Everything sounds great. Philip just commented that the audio is better. We're all good. Thank God. We would have lost every viewer if it was just me. They can only take me in seriously minimal doses, Joe.
I watch videos with just you, man. I do. So I'm sure other people do too. I've seen your numbers. So
oh my gosh. Well, again, thanks for coming on. We're going to talk about what, Joe's been up to in the past. We're going to talk about some of his current stuff, his future plans. We're going to get into all of that. But I am relatively new to the world of Joe Byrne. Really, since I started BookTube, I was slightly unaware, of you being an author because I was very unaware of all independent and self-published authors. So while it seems kind of normal now, since we're sort of all in it, and when I say in it, I mean kind of this bookish community club, whether it be on YouTube or whether it be on X or Instagram or wherever, self-publishing is very relevant in front of us all the time. But if I back myself out about 7 months, I was in a read along, and one of the prompts was you had to pick an independently self-published book. And I was completely lost. I had no idea what that was going to be. And it turns out, we'll get into this a little bit later, it turns out the book that I selected was Wistful Ascending because I thought, the cover was super cool and it just struck my attention. And for lack of, anything else that I had been like kind of saving up or anything else in terms of a TBR, because I didn't really know what a TBR was at that point, right? I mean, I had my Goodreads to read list, but I didn't know what a TBR was. The cover sold it to me. So before we get into the series, I'm hoping maybe you can share with us a little bit about your background, kind of how you grew up, where you grew up, and the beginnings of Joe Byrne, so to speak.
Okay, the beginnings. I was born in I'm a New Yorker, born and raised. I was born in Brooklyn, raised in Brooklyn. I went to high school in Manhattan. I went to college in the state of New York, but I had to leave the city. And I was always kind of what we would, it wasn't cool then, but I was a nerd, right? Before, right? So I was the kid who, in the third grade, I picked up like Jules Verne books off my parents' bookshelves and E. Doc Smith, and I just read them because that's what I had something to distract that's what I like to do. I like sci-fi, geeky stuff. In the fourth grade, I got really into comics. So I'm that guy who went to the comic book store, every Wednesday for like 30 years.
Same here.
Yeah, and bought not everything on the rack because you can't.
Yeah.
So I was there through the whole mostly Marvel, but like a lot of the independent stuff. Yeah, Philip, we're not. I drive not far from your house every time because I drive from New York to Maryland all the time.
Yeah, Philip, that bush that's slightly moving outside in your front lawn is definitely not me in a bush disguise. I promise. Just keep your eyes on your own TV and on your own computer, and don't worry about that bush that's slightly moving.
Philip a book. And part of me was like, I could just drop it off. I could just drive up to his house and drop it in his mail. And I ended up not doing things. I'm like, okay, there got to be some boundaries we have to respect.
So Brooklyn born and raised, Manhattan school.
Yeah. I went to a magnet school in Manhattan. So for all our arrogant kids, and
Sure.
who were full of ourselves, and um, and I was really into to reading. And I think I probably would have wanted to be a science fiction author when I was in high school. But to me, that felt like being a successful actor, right? Like you had to be inordinately lucky. It wasn't like a thing you planned on as a career. It just didn't seem realistic. So I didn't. I didn't pursue it at all. And then, but I was heavily involved in all kinds of nerdy media, right? I was into anime when anime was new in this country, late
Sure.
80s, when you were
Yeah.
huddled in little groups at college, like watching someone in California would get a laser disc and they would make VHS copies of it, and you would get a copy of a copy of a copy, and
Right.
someone would buy it for like $60, and you didn't. It wasn't subtitled. You would just get printouts of like the plot synopsis of the one Japanese guy who knew Japanese who lived in in San Francisco would type it. You
Yeah.
get a
Get a
Xerox
script.
copy. Get a Xerox
Yeah.
copy. Like, oh, so where are those missiles coming from? Aiko's shooting missiles at Seiko. Those actual names of characters. But where are the missiles? It doesn't say where the missiles are coming from. You're looking through the pages, trying to figure. So that was my life.
I
And I
love it.
a lot of manga, a lot of Korean comics, a lot of martial arts movies. I got into martial arts. Heidi's asking Sunni. I'm Sunni Buffalo, class of '88. Not that that's relevant to
Yeah.
anyone but me, but there you go.
Excellent. So you were into martial arts at that time. I was too, right
Yeah.
around that same time.
Oh yeah. When I went to college, I joined the club. There was a karate club, Seido Karate, at my college, and I started training then. And I trained. I got up to my first. I've had various reasons not to train, so I have not trained. I have not trained straight through for the last 35 years, but I've trained half of them, right? So half the time, roughly. So yeah, so I did that. I got my third degree black belt in I want to say 2012.
Oh my gosh.
2012? Now I can't remember. I should know this. I should write my own bio and study what year did these? I'm 53. I don't remember when anything happened. Leave me alone.
That's okay. That's fine.
But, I'm sadly out of shape right now. But I did a lot of martial. But I also studied martial arts at in the useless way. I watch a lot of MMA analysis.
Sure.
I read a lot of books because I know people who train and they're great fighters or whatever, but they don't really pursue it as an intellectual pursuit on top of that. But right. I've always been more about. I'm always the guy who had a huge collection of martial arts books.
Sure.
That I read more than I practiced, which isn't
so really kind of the philosophy of it all as well.
Philosophy and the tactics and the training side and that kind of stuff. So I've always been fascinated in that. If I can use, get an edge by thinking my way instead of just looking my way, because work is hard.
I think that's probably uncommon in the West, that people would read martial arts to learn, more about it. I think that's probably more prevalent in other parts of the world. This is the first time I've ever heard of anybody who's seriously doing, martial arts, actually studying it in book form.
My instructor at Buffalo, she's on Chris Kale, who I still am in touch with occasionally. Doesn't live too far from me. He has a huge library of books.
That's awesome.
I have a big library. I mean, it doesn't make me a great fighter, but it does probably help me as a writer.
Sure. Absolutely. For all kinds of reasons.
Yeah,
but
I'm exposed to all kinds of things that I know about, but I can't physically do. But I can write about them, right?
So when you went to college, what were you studying?
Oh God, I was pre-med.
Okay.
First, and it's annoying because I make bad life decisions. I should have been an engineer, really, because that's what
okay.
But I was pre-med because I thought learning about the body would be cool, and then I realized after a while I didn't really want to be a doctor. I wanted to know what doctors knew, but I didn't want to do doctor work.
Right.
That's not a smart way to live your life. You can't plan that way, right?
It's interesting. I've got a friend of mine, Dr. Alaron Kong, who is a medical doctor. He calls himself basically the father of American lit RPG. He's written the Land series. He's now moved to Portugal. He's not even being a doctor right now. He's writing books. So I think you probably had a leg up on him coming to that decision as early as you did. Yeah. He went through all of medical school and residency and practice, and then started writing fantasy books and decided he liked that better.
No, I wasn't cut out for medicine. I like the studying part of it. Oh, hey, excellent.
Jimmy's the greatest. We love Jimmy over here.
I like Jimmy a lot too. Yeah, watched a bunch of his videos. Yeah.
So,
So
so you,
but then I decided, okay, I didn't want to do medicine, so I was going to do so I went into philosophy. I studied philosophy. I got a degree in philosophy. I did graduate work in philosophy. Never quite got good enough at it to get a job doing philosophy. So then I did
why?
it for a while.
But other than academia, I mean, this is probably a question for Philip or Jared, but other than academia, who hires, I mean, is philosopher like a job listing?
Oh, no! It's extremely lucrative. You can do a lot of things. You can get a degree in philosophy. You can drive a cab. You can like load trucks for UPS.
Right.
I did that for a couple of years. I loaded trucks. I
Yeah.
unloaded trucks, and then I loaded trucks. So I moved around the warehouse doing different kinds of shifts.
Yeah.
You can do a lot of things. And here's
Amazon's not hiring for philosophers at the
no,
moment. No.
because I was pre-med for like a year. I took just enough science classes that I ended up getting a job as a chemistry teacher in Baltimore City, and I did that for like 10 years.
Wow.
Okay. And then finally, my little brother saved me because he was like, Joe, you should program. This is what you're like. This is what you're suited for, which is he's right. Like my brain is good at, relatively speaking, is good at that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Like math, science, like
Sure.
That comes naturally to me. That's what I should have done all along. I was
Right.
just smart not to. And then I went into and I learned how to code and I started working for my brother. And now I'm still with that company. He moved on, but I'm still with the same company.
Right.
And, I write software that I told you off camera. We sell financial data. So, I don't understand what any of it means, to be honest. The financial data, I don't like someone just tells me, oh, like, in this database, if this field is like this number, then we have to send this other thing to this person. I don't know what any of it means.
Yeah. Yeah, like, sure.
But I can write the code that the business guy tells me to write, and that's my job.
So
And,
I know you do that from home, and clearly, when the pandemic hit, that had to have happened then as well. Were you working were you working at home pre-pandemic, or were you going in, or how did that work?
I was working from home starting in like 2011.
So really, when everybody else stayed home, you were like,
This was not new to me, but
right.
working from home got me deeply hooked on social media because I could often, especially before I'm married now, but I was separated for a while. Oh, hey, Usman, thank you. So I was like, I had a situation where I could go 3 or 4 days without seeing another human being.
Yeah.
I was working long days and I was in the house and I was in front of a computer, but like no human contact. I mean, Facebook was a lifesaver. People mock it, but like that was my human contact.
Right.
And like now I still use Twitter this way, right? If I have like a thought, like something annoys me about like something, like someone will tweet something and I'm like, that you shouldn't say that. You should. There's no one in the room for me to.
Right.
When I want to say that's what she said.
Yeah.
No one hears me.
Right.
Myself, so I tweet it.
That
I'm on social media all the time. Other people treat it as like a job, or they think that like you're trying to be fake or drum up like interest in yourself. But for me, it's just like it's my outlet.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more that people get to know you, the more that they get your personality and they understand that. Yeah, what's that?
Yeah, I said for better or for worse.
For better or for worse, right? But I mean, I don't think it takes too long of being in your company, either virtually like this, or just watching some of your other videos or your conversations, to know that you're not out there 100% just all the time trying to sell books. I mean, you're out there being you. It's a social outlet.
If I tweet something that goes viral,
yeah,
I mean, I've had some semi-viral tweets. Okay, I promise that was not my intent.
Right.
I sit there and go, what's going to get me a bunch of views? What's going to get people to really spread this? I never start there. Sometimes I accidentally get there, but it's always something has annoyed me, or something I find interesting, or I think of a stupid joke that I want to share. It always starts there. It never starts with what's going to get me a ton of views. I never. So it's I don't know.
That makes some sense. So I did notice that your first is Wistful Ascending your first book that you've ever written, or had you written before that? I don't know, because it's certainly the hybrid Helix series is the one that we hear everything about. I don't know if there's a back catalog of or not.
Okay, so there's nothing available.
Okay,
and I want to say 99. No, I think in 98. I was working for UPS loading trucks, and I would come, work from like 3 to 8 in the morning. Then I'd come home and I'd have the day, and I wrote a fantasy novel. Basically, it was a dwarven enforcer for the mob.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah, and
It's kind of got a cool premise.
yeah, and I didn't know what I was doing, so I wrote this book, and I sent it to Tor, and they of course rejected it, which they should have. It was terrible. It had good things in it. I mean, I think if you read it now, you'd say, "Oh, there's some good things." You wouldn't say it was a good book. You
Yeah.
might say there's a couple cool things in here, maybe.
Yeah.
You wouldn't say it was a good book. I
Yeah.
get it now, but I didn't really understand like how to form a writers group. Like I didn't have any training in writing. I mean, philosophy writing papers for a philosophy major is not like writing fiction. Like the criteria are completely different. Like
Sure.
they don't overlap. People think they really don't. So I had no idea like how to. I didn't know what passive voice was. I didn't know anything. So I wrote this book, and it was fine, and my friends liked it, because your friends like what you write. It's
Sure.
It's sweet, but whatever. And then I didn't really go anywhere. I didn't really know how to polish it or edit it. I didn't know what I was. So I just kind of gave up for a while. In 2006, I was teaching, and I had like planning time during the day, and I was too tired to actually plan. I wrote another book, and then I have boxes of like first chapters.
Interesting.
Because if you're a writer. Most writers I know get lots of ideas.
Sure.
These are cheap. This is why the running joke. You go to a writer, I have a great idea. You write it, and I'll give you my idea. We'll split the profits, right? Many professional writers have had someone approach them, and it's just like, no. Getting the idea is not the hard part. Like that's not
right.
Any percentage of the money. Like the ideas, we get ideas none of us have enough time to write the ideas.
All the ideas, right?
You're getting wrong. It's the execution's the hard part, right? The ideas are cheap. So I had a lot of ideas. I really do have boxes full of notebooks with like settings, outlines, chapter one.
Do you feel like any of them may make a comeback or find their way into some of the series that you're currently working on?
Large parts of them have influenced, because you can steal from these things,
right?
And no one knows. Like you don't know what I like. The first fantasy book I wrote was set on. I always loved the idea of ring world, so it's a fantasy ring world. I still use that setting. It's changed, but it's clearly related to that book I wrote in 1998, like 26 years ago. Okay,
that's very cool.
The magic system I use, I developed in graduate school in the mid 90s to get. So I had a friend who was a science fiction guy, and he's like, well, if you have magic in your world, why isn't it like industrialized? Why aren't there factories producing magic weapons? You have to have a magic system that meets very specific criteria, or he wouldn't buy it. And that was the foundation of the magic system that I created in like the early 90s, which I still use. It's the magic system in the hybrid helix and partial function. Right? I tweaked it. It's been tweaked over the years, but it's the same thing. So I steal from myself. I'm never going to go back, and I don't think I'm ever going to rewrite those stories. But the Grim Dwarf, which is the serial I release on my Patreon for free. Anyone can read it. Every week I put out a chapter, except this week I've been bad. It's a long story. But were there dinosaurs on the ring? No, there were no dinosaurs in that version. Daniel's asking. So a lot of these ideas get recycled. I'm not going to go back and take any of those stories probably and ever finish them, because I get new ideas that are probably better.
Right.
But all this, all the stuff I wrote, Dragon Ball Z, what amounted to Dragon Ball Z fanfic, and a lot of that came out in the hybrid helix. This themes got carried through. So I'm never going to rewrite those, because I don't need to rewrite those books. Like I have new things stuck in my head.
And you can. There's only so much time in the day too, especially working a full-time job as well. Yeah. So how do you describe your writing style? I mean, what makes a Joe Byrne book a little bit different than other books in the genre? And I know what my personal opinion is, what makes it different, but I'm interested in yours.
Who goes first?
Well,
you want me to go
I'll go first.
Okay.
Here's kind of where I see these books, because I know I think I described Return of the Griffin when I was talking about it in one of my updates, which is book 2 in his Hybrid Helix series. It's sort of like a novelization of a comic book story. But there is more than that too, because it combines elements from comic books. It combines, the superheroes from comic books, but it combines science fiction, because we're dealing with a space station that's, basically sentient. We're dealing with spaceships, which essentially defines science fiction. but we're also dealing with a magic system as well. So we've got fantasy in there. So it's kind of, in a sense, the hybrid in the word hybrid helix to me is relevant because it's a hybrid of a lot of different genres put together into a book.
It's not an accident.
Interesting.
It's not an accident. There's a reason I call it a helix, and there's a reason the hybrid's in there. And I never use those words to mean just one thing because I'm a little bit, I don't know, maybe OCD or something. But I really like that. All the book titles have multiple meanings. You know, Wistful Ascending, I love it. And I think I love it more than anyone else. But like, because Wistful's the space station, and her position in the political scenario of the galaxy is rising in the course of the story. Because the events that happen in the story. But Rohan means ascending in Sanskrit, which I actually say in the book once. Okay? So Rohan is himself wistful because the fact that his position and is returned to this, like the center of like attention and like conflict, he's wistful about the fact that he's being put back in the middle of these things he doesn't want to be a part of. So the title means both things. Return of the Griffin means two things, right? Rohan goes back to Earth.
Yep.
Literally returning the guy, right? But also he's bringing back his Griffin persona.
His persona, right?
To handle the invasion, and so it means both things, which are not the same.
Right.
Every book does that. I'm a little anal about that.
So you've got the wordplay going on, and since you mentioned it, I had it on a question for later, but I may as well ask it now. There's definitely a lot of Indian influence when you're talking about samosas and Rohan himself. Where does that come from? Because I have a lot of Indian friends, so I'm familiar with all of the holidays. I used to throw every holiday on the Indian calendar. I used to throw them at my nightclub. Yeah,
I love that. I love all that. I'm a huge. I'm passionate about South Asian. I want to say South Asian popular culture. Like I don't pretend to really understand like Hinduism and like the philosophical aspects of that. I mean, it's a very deep and complex culture. But I love like Indian movies, like Bollywood movies, Tollywood movies. I watch a lot of action movies, and a big inspiration for the hybrid helix was Tollywood. Telugu action films.
Okay.
There's a whole set of these Telugu action films, more than Bollywood, but both, but mostly, where there's this very interesting thing where the main characters are very sort of overpowered. They're very cool. There's this thing that happens where you watch this action movie and you never really think that they could lose. There's no like that moment in the second act that
there's no stakes
structure where they're like everything's about to fall on them.
Yeah.
The empire's about to destroy the rebellion. It never happens. They're just breezing through, and what you're gripping is how cool are they going to look when they win? Like how cool is this guy is like facing a bunch of bad guys and he's getting beaten up because his mom won't let him fight. And you're waiting. You're like, his mom's going to change her mind. His mom is like, you know what? Kick their asses.
Okay, you can go. Yeah.
And then he does. And you're never worried that that's not going to happen. You know it will. But you're still, and I love these films, right? So I'm like, how can we not have that tension, that fear that it's all going to crush us? And, but yet still find these, and not everyone likes these movies. Plenty of people think they're trash, which, I mean, that's fine, right? But I love them. So Rohan is almost always the toughest guy in the room.
Yeah.
You don't read these books thinking he's about to get his butt kicked.
Right.
You're thinking if he really wants to, he's going to crush everyone around him. The question is like, is he going to let go? What's it going to cost him when he does? Or can he win in some cool other way?
I think it was so, like I said, I'm only partial way through the series right now. Now, I don't know if Rohan could take on the green though. The green might kick his ass. I don't know.
Yeah.
The green's not.
Yeah. But you know, there's different ways to win, right? So like, how do you beat the green? You beat the green by leaving him alone. Like that, the green's the Hulk, right? The green's the Hulk. You leave him alone. And you know, I don't know if I put this in the book, but I always imagine the army just like sending helicopters and just dropping like tons of food for the guy. Yeah,
I mean I think mission accomplished there, because when I was reading Return of the Griffin, that was what was going on in my mind, was the army, you know, basically this huge area surrounding this one, you know, green monster. I was like, okay, I know what Joe's doing here. This is good, but it worked. I mean, and he's got this downtime where he's, you know, coherent, and I don't want to spoil the book for anybody, but yeah.
That was very reminiscent of like the way a lot of Hulk stories from the early Hulk issues.
Right.
I read a lot of like the Marvel comics from the 60s as reprints in the early 80s when I was a kid.
Sure.
Late 70s, early. So I read all the early Hulk issues as reprints because you could easily do that.
So when you were into the comic books, what were you across the board Marvel? Did you have particular favorites that you never missed any editions of?
I was a bigger fan of the street level heroes.
Okay, so Daredevil,
Daredevil. I was really
Spider-Man.
I was really big in Shang-Chi. I never liked Iron Man. Iron Man, I always had a problem with Iron Man, which I don't know if it's worth. Just always felt like anyone could have worn the suit.
Yeah.
Which made me not like Iron Man, but like Shang-Chi, he was trained, right? He had skills that weren't replicable. So I love that comic. Moon Knight, I was big on Moon Knight.
Did you watch the series at all?
Hmm?
Did you watch the Moon Knight series that had come out?
Yes.
I actually liked it. Parts of it, maybe.
I very much liked it.
Yeah.
I don't like that. That's not my favorite interpretation of Moon Knight.
Yeah.
I prefer the old Sienkiewicz Moon Knights from when the first run in Marvel, which was got to be the early 80s.
Yeah.
He was really Batman.
Yeah.
Basically,
Batman. He was Marvel's Batman.
Yeah. The emphasis on him as being a person with like serious psychological disabilities, that came much later, that he was really multiple personality disorder, and it was really an affliction for him. That was a reinvention that came later, which is fine. I don't hate it.
Yeah.
It's not the Moon Knight of my heart. The Moon Knight of my heart is really just Batman.
It's basically Batman that's got Khonshu powers.
Yeah. And I like that. Bitten by a werewolf, which I always thought was a really cool origin story. He may have had magic powers from the werewolf, maybe not. We never really were clear. I was a big fan of Power Man and Iron Fist. I was an Iron Fist fan.
Oh, I loved those guys. I loved Iron Fist for sure.
And I read a lot of independents when the independents really started booming in the early 80s. Like when TMNT, when Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles came out, when all the little independent comic book publishers started coming out with the black and whites, when that got cheap and everyone stopped caring about the comics code, there was like an explosion. And I read a lot of that stuff. And a lot of it was martial arts related stuff. A lot of it was terrible, but The Badger, which was set in Wisconsin, and I love that comic, and like no one remembers it anymore. It's like
Badger.
The Badger. Yeah, he was like
that would make sense. I went to Madison. I know what the Badger is.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. Badger number 4. There's this scene where he's fighting a dude, and the dude punches him, and he looks down, and his uniform's torn. He goes, "You broke my shirt," and then he beats the crap out of the guy. And I will never forget that scene. That was like formative in my life. Badger number 4. I will never forget that. I don't know. It really struck me. I always like the hero where the hero may be having trouble, but then he's really the biggest badass in the room.
So when you start to write Hybrid Helix as a series, was the comic obviously is a huge influence? Did you go into it thinking that, well, you know what? Let me ask you this. I think I answered the question before I gave you the opportunity to answer the question. What do you describe this, series as, and what it sets it apart, from others in the genre?
It's science fantasy, right? I mean, the setting is Marvel Comics, right? It's you have Earth, you've got people with superpowers running around, but otherwise it's similar to our Earth. You've got magic and high tech available. It's the same setting as Marvel Comics. It's very similar to It's a science fantasy. It's like Star Wars is a science fantasy. So that's the genre. I don't brook any I don't think it's confusing. Like, we're used to this genre. We don't read a lot of books in it, like novels.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. But anyone who's seen a Marvel movie Avengers, you have Iron Man and like Doctor Strange fighting side by side against Thanos. You've got every element in the Hybrid Helix.
Yeah.
In that scene, right? A billion people saw that movie, right?
Right.
This is not people like, this is so unusual. But no, it's really not. You're just not looking in the right places.
It's just the literary version of it is unusual.
I can't draw and I can't make movies, right? So what I do, because I think I'm a decent writer, so I write books, right? If I could draw, this would be a comic. Right?
Yeah.
Film, it would be a movie. I don't know,
But I think in some sense, what you're doing is it'd be very difficult to replicate without, a $1 billion budget for a movie. Yeah. I mean, unless the entire thing is going to be animated, it would be extraordinarily difficult.
Yeah. And even animating isn't something one person can really do.
Right.
You need a studio and, I'm very happy with the text version. Like, I don't feel like, man, I don't wake up at night, if I could draw, this would be a comic and that'd be so
right.
A comic would be harder because like it would be so much slower to tell the story.
Yeah,
You know?
I do think it'd be a cool TV series. I think that, if they can make something like The Boys, they can certainly make something like Hybrid Helix.
Oh, I would love that. I mean, I would love a Bollywood adaptation. I think that would be fantastic.
There you go.
Would kill for that. I mean, Rowan's Indian, right? Like,
Right.
he should be played by an Indian actor. But yeah, that's the genre. And I'll tell you what there's a meta theme to everything I write, which is like in my mind, there's like a book. Like there are books that are like fun, and they're like page turners, and they pull you in. But and then there's another quality books have where when you read them, you think about them afterwards, and it like you have. I just realized that this is actually saying something interesting about the world or about my life or about morality, or there's this twist in here that really says that these characters have depth to them, that you have like they reward reflection, right? They're rewarding to think about. So great literature is what we think of as stuff that rewards reflection. And what we think of as a beach read, it just pulls you through. But maybe with a beach read, if you think about it afterwards, there's nothing there, right? Like it's fun, but if you're going to spend 2 more hours thinking about the story, you're not getting any added value.
Right.
So in my mind, I separate that as a book can be fun, or a book can be, or a book, like these are 2 separate qualities. Some books are both. You can have fun and good, right? Something that is both pulls you through and rewards like thought. And my goal is always fun first, but let's have some thought-provoking stuff in there on the back end.
I think that makes, to me, that's exactly how it reads. It's certainly fun. It's definitely a page turner. But there are, like, if I have found myself, thinking after reading the books that, okay, I get what he's saying here. And you're actually saying something besides telling a comic book action story.
I mean, Rohan's like basically like giving you Sartrean existentialism.
Yeah.
While punching spaceships.
Yeah. Or towing them into, where they're supposed to go.
I throw that stuff in there, but you can read the book and not think about it. I mean, my goal is always you can read the book and not think about it and have a good time. And that's always my primary goal. My primary goal is to give someone an escape. You have a hard day, you can crack one of these open and you're going to have fun. And you don't have to think about it. You don't have to invest. I want something there for you to invest in.
Yeah, I wish more authors would do that, because I think it's a great skill. Not everybody can do it. Not everybody has your sense of humor. I mean, I truly believe you're either kind of funny or you're not. It's a difficult skill to learn. You can't go to the gym for funny. And if you are, I think that, I've talked about, like, I'd like my channel to be as much value as possible, however somebody defines value. And for some people it's entertainment value, cause I just put on, Rick Thunder and here we go. Or, for some it's, book reviews, and maybe I can save them some time or help steer them in a direction that worked for me. So there's some informative value. Sometimes we do one for the road, so there's a little bit more motivational value, but the entertainment value in literature, I think, is greatly overlooked. And I think in some regard, it's because it's maybe a little bit tougher to do than what we call epic fantasy or dark fantasy or science fiction.
I have a theory about this. I think, because if you look at what books that win awards, they tend not to be the funny books.
Right.
And I think people undervalue the funny. And I think part of it is because they think that if it's funny, like if you enjoy the surface level reading, you don't have to dig any further. So people don't. So they think there's nothing further to dig into.
Right.
Because I've had people review my books and say, "Oh, great beach read, nothing to think about here." And I'm like, "Well, you didn't think about it."
Right.
I would agree that there's nothing to think about. You just chose not to, which is fine. You read it the way you read it.
And you got entertainment value out of it, which is your stated primary goal. So cool.
Yeah. And that's good, but I don't love the review that says nothing to be thought about. It's like you could have tried,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not gonna go yell at the person. I'm just saying, like,
yeah. But I also think, though, it's sort of human nature to kind of pigeonhole works into whatever specific box they want to put them in. And if for them if it's a beach read, it's a beach read. And thank you for purchasing and reading my book.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, maybe by book 3 they'll find some philosophical elements about it,
Yeah.
you know, that go, oh, you know what, I was just thinking about this wrong, or maybe not seeing the entire picture of it while I was thinking that this is a comic book read.
Well, that's the other tricky part is I'm really trying to write a series.
Yeah.
Wistful Ascending was meant to be a book one of a series. It was not meant to be a standalone. Like that was my
Right.
intent when I wrote it. I was laying clues for, so you can't just put everything down on the table. Like I had someone say like, well, why didn't he learn how to handle his anger in the first book? And I'm like, well, I have 20 more books to yeah. You could read it upside down.
Yeah.
I can't have him solving all his like problems and having all his personal growth. So I want to have a little bit of personal growth, but spread out over 20 books. That's tricky.
Yeah.
That's
Do you
not
have
simple.
do you have a goal in mind for how many books you would like to write?
I yes and no, right? It's many, right? Like book 5 is done. I just got it back from my line editor today. So I mean,
Okay.
it's done. It's polishing of sentences, all that's left. So the story is finished. I know what book 6 is like. I know how I want the series to end, and I know the general progression of what I want to happen. Exactly how many books that takes, I really don't. I jokingly say 25, but that's because Harry Dresden was supposed to be 25 books.
Right.
I kind of structurally pattern my books after Harry Dresden.
Cool.
Right? Like this idea of like a series of standalones where each book, there's some progress in this overarching story, but each book is a standalone story.
Yeah.
I just stole that from, and Butcher's not the only one to do that, right?
No.
That's an old structure, right? Stephen Bruss did it with Jarek, in the 30 years ago. So it's not new, but
and it's what Marvel did too. I mean, movies are standalone, yet at the same time, they're all part of an overarching cinematic universe.
Yeah.
That advances whichever particular, main, I guess, arc they're on, for each decade.
Yeah. They had a really unique ability to do that, having one team behind the whole thing, which was
right
phenomenal.
For decades.
Yeah. Which you can't do in the comics. Really.
Right. So when you're developing characters like Rohan and the other side characters and the storylines, what's your creative process like? Do you just get an idea and start writing, or do you have a certain kind of routine that you go through when it's time to write? Because I would imagine having the full-time job in software, you got to be doing that while you're doing that. What's your routine for the creative process?
I'm working on stories and story ideas anytime I'm not like unconscious or doing my actual day job. Like if I'm laying in bed at night and I can't sleep, I'm thinking about, hey, Andrew, I'm thinking about, storylines and plot lines. And I always get inspiration from stuff I watch, from movies, I never steal a storyline directly from a movie or anything, but you get kind of, I want to replicate this feeling I have at this scene. And how do I do that? And then you fit it in. But it's just when I'm not doing anything else, that's what my brain is working on, which probably annoys my wife.
Yeah,
She'll talk to me. And I'm like walking through the kitchen. I'm like really thinking about like this character arc, and she's like trying to talk to me. And I'm like, what?
So what do you do? Do you write it down? Do you grab your phone and open up the notes app and start, because creative people in general have great ideas, but they forget them as often as they think of them. So I like to ask creative people, what do you do to keep it in front of your face for when you have time to actually expand on the idea?
Any inspiration from Fallout? No, nothing from, I don't know Fallout. I think is that a game?
Yeah, it's a video game, and now it's a TV show.
I'm not a big gamer, actually. I'm not a big gamer. I'm not.
And that actually surprises me, because you're of the exact age that, all the video games are coming out, right then. And being a comic book guy, that's unusual. Normally they would go hand in hand, but if you're not, you're not. But
I think I would get too frustrated too easily. So I pick up on the ones that are really cool.
Yeah.
I play a lot of strategy games, like really, really easy ones, just to sort of like, almost like as meditation. Like I'll play a puzzle game.
Sure.
Just to give my fingers something to do while I'm thinking about other stuff. That's what I'll do. I'll think about other stuff. I will take notes. I'll open a Google Doc when I'm ready to write a book.
Okay.
Lots of notes. I'll have a whole like section of these are titles I could use, and these are. No one should look at them ever, but if you ever did, you'd see all kinds of discarded plot lines and early names for characters that I don't use, and And generally, I'll get like an idea for the major plot line. Like I don't know where I got like the sharks from Return of the Griffin from. I'm sure there was a place.
It's awesome.
Where I got this idea. I can't remember where I stole that from.
I mean, that was fantastic. I mean,
thank you.
I mean, basically, if Godzilla was a shark,
yeah. I think I wanted to do Pacific Rim. So there's a giant robot in that book, but they're off screen, right? They're not seen. The Otaku Force 5. I have a whole storyline behind them that no one will never see the light of day. Oh, and Spiral and Amber were another first chapter that got discarded. I wrote a book about them before Rohan ever existed.
Wow.
Yeah, I had a book plan. I never really finished it, but then I stole those characters wholesale. List was in that book. List, Spiral, and Amber from Return of the Griffin were in another book. So I don't know. The ideas come, and I will write them down. Usually, when I'm getting I have a process where when I'm working on the next book, I have the vaguest idea, and then I start adding little bits and bits and bits and more bits, and then I actually start a timeline when I'm ready to write. And the timeline is where things get tricky.
Besides the business aspect of it, because we'll get into that here in a minute, but just from the actual writing process, what kind of challenges, have you faced? And are there some that are kind of an ongoing challenge, or has there been one that's been, kind of one that you had to work to surmount that challenge? I'm interested to know it because when I was a musician, it was always, writing songs. And so from an artist to an artist, it's an interesting topic for me.
So I don't think I'm typical in this way, but my biggest problem is falling in love with my own stuff. See, okay, so the Hybrid Helix is written for me, right? It is the book I most wanted to read. And here's the problem, right? You come up with this cool, think of it, big picture or small picture. You have this cool thing in your head, right? And you cool fight scene, cool series of moves. You write it down, and then you read what you just wrote. And what you have is, it reminds you of the cool fight scene in your head.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, that is cool. Because it's cool. Because there's a cool thing in your head. But that's not what matters. What matters is, do the words actually evoke that cool fight scene in someone else's head?
Right.
The fact that it pulls it out of your head doesn't help anybody else. You need to write the words that make someone else see that in some level, that fight scene that whatever it is, right? And you can take that in a grand level, like the character development arc. You have this thing in your head. Do the words on the page make someone else feel those character moments that you had in your head? And you have to divorce it. It's very hard because, like I said, you know what you were meant to write. So you read what you wrote and it reminds you of what you meant. And you're like, this is fantastic. It's not. It's shit. Because no one else reading that gets what you had in your mind.
Yeah.
You have to learn to sort of read it as if you had never had those thoughts and judge, did these words actually get me back there?
I love that because I think that's an ongoing process then, because you write a chapter, you go back, you read that chapter, you say, is this for me? Did I write this? Is this a journal for me or is this for a reader?
I'm getting better over time at reading, and I can tell because of what my beta reader feedback is.
Okay.
They give me fewer criticisms where I just totally missed the boat on this section.
Okay.
Less of that as time goes on. Because I've written 6 books in 3 years, right? If I wasn't getting better, there'd be something wrong with me, right?
Yeah.
But beta readers are super important because usually a beta reader will tell me something like, this character is acting weird. And I'll realize this character is acting weird because I had this whole justification for their behavior in my mind. I never put it on the page.
Interesting.
Right? Because in my mind, I knew why this character was licking everything. Right? I knew what the reason was, but I never actually wrote it down or referred to it.
So nobody else knows.
So no one else is like, why is she licking things?
Yeah.
And this is an actual thing from book 5, from Eyes of Empire. Right? Why is she licking? What is happening here? And I'm like, oh, it makes sense, but I needed like 1 sentence or 2 sentences in one place to explain the licking, right? And now it's like, okay, now we get it, right?
Now they understand what's going on.
Out of character, because something seems out of character. Like I there's a reason they're doing that out of character thing. You can, I don't always put up, but you got to put it on the page. So that's my biggest obstacle. Is I read the stuff and I'm just like, this is fantastic, and I love what I write. I always love my own stuff. It sounds terribly arrogant. I know other people like, oh, I write my own books and I always think they're shit halfway through and I hate myself. And I'm like, Like, I never feel
Yeah.
that way. I'm like, this is the best thing ever. Why are I not selling a million? Why is this not sold 1 million copies yet? You know?
But I think that that keeps you going too, because I mean, you legitimately, if in your heart you feel like you're doing something good, or at the very least that you're improving over your last work and you're getting better and better, I think that's inspirational. I think that sort of informs your writing a little bit too, because you're writing with a different level of confidence. Like if you know you like it, that you're not sitting and wondering all day long if the world is going to like it.
Yes, but also to be completely like honest, like other people get it, and that's why I'm still writing. Because
Yeah.
if I had people are like, I know a lot of people say writers, you should never read your reviews, and I'm like, I understand why someone says that, but to me, I'm like, the only reason I'm still working on this hard and not making any money because I'm not making any money, but that's fine. But like, there are people enough people have read these books who have written like, oh, I love how this and this thing are connected, and this reflects like this thing from a movie, and this character, like, oh, I like what the most recent thing I can think of, Sam Harrison is another YouTuber, right? He's describing Wistful Ascending. He's like, Rowan's kind of suffering from PTSD, right? And I'm like,
Hmm.
he got it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's the only one who got it. Like lots of people have gotten lots of
Yeah.
things, but this is just a very recent example in my mind, right? Like he got, and I never say there, oh, he's got PTSD. I don't have him sitting there and like thinking about committing suicide and all these dark, but you can, it's like I hint at it.
Yeah, I mean, he's gone through, at least to the parts that I've read through in the first two books, he's gone through all kinds of crap.
He's committed genocide.
Yeah.
He says it. He said
Yeah.
it. People are like, this is light reading. I'm like, it's not all light reading, He
Right.
genocide on the page, war crimes on the page.
Right.
I'm like,
It's just it tonally doesn't feel like that though.
right. So someone has
Because
to kind of think about it, right?
exactly.
So when someone gets that, like, I was trying to do this in a sort of subtle, indirect way because I didn't want to write another book about a tormented dude, like just tearing his hair out and like having all the self-destructive. And those books are fantastic. That's just not what I wanted to write.
Sure.
We've seen that before. We've seen that narrative about this person who's come back from war and is like tormented by the things they've done, and right, that's not new. But I want it. But when someone gets it, I'm like, okay, we had this. This is a guy, thousands of miles. We had this moment of like connection, and like I live for that. I mean, well, no, I don't live for that. I write for that.
Yes.
Let's put it that way. Right? I write. That's because if no one was getting it, like, why would I be? This is too much work. Like, these are hard.
It is. I mean, and that's one of the things I was going to ask you is like, what's the better feeling for you? Putting that the end at the end of the book and the book is done, or when the reviews come in and seeing happy readers.
Happy readers mean more because, I mean, look, I've seen people say like, oh, I only write for myself. I don't care if anyone else likes it. I'm like, and I've seen people tweet this, right? And I'm like,
right.
You're full of crap, right? Because why would you publish it? You can just write the book and keep it on your hard drive and just
erase
it or whatever. No, you're not. You're not writing just for yourself.
Right.
Let's be honest, right? You're not making any money, right? You're doing this because you want that, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? You want to make this connection, have this communicative experience with other human beings. So, like, just like when you perform a piece of music and you make people feel a certain way, I'm sure it's the same kind of thing. It's a type of communication, right?
Absolutely.
It's not a conversation. It's another kind of communication. But when I write a book and someone reads it and gets it, we are communicating. When they write a review and I read the review and I know that they got it, that's a loop. And I live for that.
And especially because you see it on the other side as well as a reader, right? So, I mean, you read and you have those kind of same effects. Books affect you the way that you hope that, your readers are being affected by you.
Because it all starts with something that I experienced, right? I saw a movie and it made me feel a certain way, like Wistful Ascending, the most immediate antecedent is Invincible.
Sure.
Like the comic. This is before the cartoon came out.
Sure.
The most direct. I got cool feelings from reading sections of Invincible. Like I want to give this to someone else, So it's a loop. And like Robert Kirkman doesn't know who I am, right? Like, that's fine. But like, I know who some of my readers are, and I get some of those in-depth reviews of people who really get, is there any chance of more books in the audio treatment? Yes, I'm working on it. Partial Function is getting an audio treatment. My narrator has had some setbacks, but she is working on it. It's like 6 chapters are done. So the others I'm working on. Audio is expensive. Is the problem? There's a level of how much money am I willing to burn on my writing career?
Right.
At some point it's like, do I want to spend my kids' inheritance on audiobooks and never make it back?
And the answer is yes. And they can blame me later because they can go back into the archives of For Whom the Bell Tolls and see this dude in Minnesota
my kids don't care.
talk their father out of leaving him
yeah.
anything so he could have a narrator.
And right now, Wayne is taking a break. My narrator from Wistful Ascending is taking a break. He had some health issues.
Okay.
So I'm hoping I can get him back and get some more. I will get more done. But I'm also trying to write more in ways that are cheaper for me. Like Partial Function had a less expensive cover. My next book that's coming out, which is going to be a collection of the Grimm Dwarfs' first 25 chapters, I got a less expensive cover, which is still very cute, but not as pricey as a Chris McGrath. So I'm trying to release these in a way that is not won't get me in as much trouble in my marriage.
Sure.
For obvious, I like my wife, so I love my wife. But you know what I mean?
Well, that sort of leads into the next question that I had was, how does this all balance with the rest of your life? I mean, we talked a little bit about career, but like in the home life, how do you balance that? Right. I mean, because it's not just a hobby. It takes lots of time and it can take money and an investment. It's really a side business.
Yeah, that's happened a couple times, right? So some young dude like Adam Holcomb will say like, "Oh, we're having a baby this fall," and I'm like, "Right now, like get your writing done now because when the baby comes, it's going to be a lot harder." And I'm like, there's a reason that I'm like self-publishing when my Wistful Ascending came out when my youngest was like, over 12, right? I don't have any toddlers in the house that I'm chasing around, and my children are from a previous marriage, so they spend most of the time with their mom. So
gotcha.
I'm not with them most days, and for better or for worse. So I'm not, and my wife works a lot. She's a physician. She works outside the house. She does a lot of weekend shifts. And so I have a lot of time, and I have a lot of time and I work from home. So I can put in an 8-hour day and I still have a lot of time left because I don't have an hour, 90-minute commute each way. I go to the office maybe once a week, and then I do have a 90-minute commute each way because it's a New York thing. But,
one of the things that I just, like I said, I didn't realize you had a YouTube channel until extremely recently. And there's good content on there. And one of the ones that I watched today, I'm hoping maybe you can share with everybody who's watching kind of the point of the video. Certainly you don't need to go into the 20, some minute version of it. But what you had done was you were talking about the business breakdown of traditional publishing and what you're talking about when these publishing houses are reading and making decisions on which kinds of books they want to pick up and what they want to make offers for. And not only what they think they'll turn a profit with, but what they think they are personally capable of selling and marketing. And I was hoping that maybe you could explain that a little bit to people that may have not seen that video, because I think that you made some excellent points about that. Because we've talked in the last year, maybe 2 years on BookTube about self-publishing and the growth of it, but it doesn't happen in a vacuum. And it's not like you said that a lot of and one of the things that I know this is the longest question in the history of questions. One of the things that you said that was true, and a lot of people don't like to hear it, is that a lot of self-published books are crap because anybody can write something and hit the publish button and there it is. But there's also a lot that is as good or better than traditionally published books, but there's reasons sometimes that they don't get picked up. So that was a 5-minute question. Hopefully you can give
all right,
a good answer.
Could you repeat the middle part? And then no, I'm kidding. All right. So there's this presumption that many people have that traditionally published books are better. That we can imagine that maybe there are this many books, written every month that are ready for publishing,
Mhm.
and the traditional publishing houses get the top slice, and then everything under that is either ditched or self-published, but it doesn't make it. And so clearly, if you can only read 10 books, why would you ever leave that top slice? You'd only read those. You wouldn't go deeper into the pool. But that imagines that quality is like one dimension, that books are either better or worse. You could give them like a score, right? Like out of 100, right? But that's not how it works. Traditional publishing houses, they are a small group of people acquiring editors who are looking for the thing that they believe will sell, because if they publish a book that doesn't sell, they lose their jobs.
Right.
Right. So they are looking, how do they, this is not a secret.
And I think that's important. And I want to make that distinction, because it's not just the company, whether the company makes a profit or not, it's someone's job might be on the line if that book doesn't sell.
There's a person in an office getting a stacks of manuscripts, and they're looking through them. And they don't even need to sell. They need to be able to buy the book that they can then say, I had every reason to think this would sell.
Mm-hmm.
And so you shouldn't fire me even if it doesn't sell, because I shit happens occasionally, right?
Right. Hollywood makes movies that bomb.
Yes. And
people
don't lose their jobs over that, but you lose your job over it if you took a risk and then it bombs.
Yeah.
But if you did the next Marvel movie and you did a derivative of the last Marvel movie and it's almost the same storyline and it bombs, you don't lose your job.
Right. You shrug your shoulders and you say, hey,
changed. Who could have known, right?
Right.
But if you do something really edgy and then it bombs, then you're like, well, why did you do that? Why did you take that risk, you schmuck? You're done, right? You lose your job. So what they're going to do is they're going to look for the thing that's most like the last thing that sold really well. They're looking for things that look like their last set of bestsellers that came out. They're looking for stuff that their marketing team knows how to sell, right? They're looking for the things that their marketing team understands, that the people who work at the Barnes & Noble understand, that they're familiar with, that they know how to move. And that's what they pick up. And they're really reticent to. That's why no one picked up Legends and Lattes until it had really proven itself as an indie, because it didn't look like anything that was selling before that, or not enough. So no one's going to take a chance on it now. He proved that he deserved a chance by just selling a bazillion copies as an indie. Great.
Correct.
And it's enough like other fantasy that people are like, okay, we can move this. But if you want to write like the next, so if you want like a pretty good romantasy, you can probably go to trade. Mm-hmm. But if you want to read like a lit RPG, good luck. Because trade doesn't know anything about lit RPG. Those editors don't play. They're not very old people.
Yeah.
They don't know lit RPG. They don't understand the genre. They don't know how to sell it. Their marketing team doesn't know how to sell it. They would see a stat block in a chapter and their heads would explode.
Yeah.
So they're not. It's not that those books are, and you know that it's there. You know that it's not just capitalism, right? It's just the market. Those books sell bazillions of copies.
Dungeon Crawler Carl does incredible. He Who Fights with Monsters does incredible.
And now I've seen one or two lit RPGs picked up by someone from like Orbit or Tor.
Yeah.
Is moving a lit RPG. It's in their catalog, but it's like one.
Yeah.
Where were they last year? Lit RPGs were selling a bazillion copies. Where were they? They weren't anywhere because they don't understand.
It's interesting because Matt Denham, the author of Dungeon Crawler Carl, put out a tweet yesterday saying, hey, if you're looking for books 1, 2, and 3 in physical, you better buy it in the next few hours, because you're not going to be able to for several months. And, I think a lot of people are thinking, maybe Dungeon Crawler Carl got picked up, by traditional publisher.
So who's going to be published by Tor? It's Tor's editorial team. It's what they like. And it's what they think will sell. Okay. So if your tastes align with the Tor editorial team, if the kind of stuff that they like is what you like, you probably shouldn't read indie books, right? Unless you're reading a ton. You should go through their catalog first, because they're probably getting the cream of the crop of that exact kind of book. And I don't want to get into exactly what kind of book.
Sure.
Read enough Tor books. Just go through the synopses every month from like Tor.com. Or whatever they're called now.
Right.
You can tell what kind of books they're publishing, and there's nothing wrong with those kind of books. Those books are fantastic. If that's what you love, great. But if you want to read like a fun, not like a fun superhero story, like an action story that's not like a deconstruction of the genre, that's not doing meaning first, right? It's fun first, meaning second. You're not. They're not. It's not that they're publishing books like that are better than mine.
Yeah.
They're not publishing books like that.
They're not publishing anything like yours, period.
Right. So I'm, if you want to read that kind of thing, I'm your guy. I don't mean, let me rephrase that. Indie's your place, right? I like to think I'm your guy, but maybe there's someone who's doing it better than me. I don't know. I haven't run into that. I haven't read everything out there. Either.
Sure.
I'm not saying, but one of us indie people is who you're going to have to go to, because you're not going to find anything that really is that genre, that fun first, not a deconstruction, not just, not trying to twist everything around, but really just tell a good superhero story.
I agree. And one of the things that, that I wanted to mention a little while ago, and I just remembering now, is that as many books as that you've got, you've really only been publishing for 3 or 4 years at this point, right? And I think that the series is strong enough that it doesn't take that much to all of a sudden a spark goes off and the hybrid Helix, all of a sudden you go from, and I'm not making money, to holy shit, I'm selling a ton of these books. Weirder things have happened because of BookTube for sure. And I think the series is evergreen enough that it's not, it's not like talking of exactly of today and it's going to be irrelevant 2 years from now. I think the series has some staying power. And I think the more eyes that get on it, the more likely that this thing could, blow up. I mean, I don't know. I've read a lot of books and it's on my TBR. And I say that, in all seriousness, I mean, as much as I joke around and as much as I like you, I wouldn't put this stuff on my TBR if it wasn't good.
If someone doesn't like my books, I'm like, stop reading, please. There's great books out there for you.
Yeah.
I want to read my books, right? She doesn't like this kind of stuff. That's fine. I don't love her any less, right? Like, I don't want her to suffer through the hybrid Helix.
Yeah.
Wage my ego. Like, that doesn't help anybody, But so like a year and a half ago, I really thought I'd be making money at this point, and like I could not at that point really imagine that I'd have this much like YouTube attention and still not be making movies. But middle to late I think it was a Dragon Con last year, which was August, and I realized that like I had enough positive feedback from people, enough these experiences like what we're having right now, right? Like, this is exactly the kind of thing I was talking about. I was talking about like Sam Harrison's review. I was talking about H.C. Newton, the irresponsible reader, did this amazingly long, in-depth review of Wistful Ascending that just like made my year. Like stuff Andrew Wisley reads, pumping up, all these experiences. And I was like, you know what? I'm good. Like if I just keep losing money at this very manageable rate, I'm fine. And if books take off and I make a ton of money, I'll buy a Z4, right? Like I have a plan. Like I know like if I can make $100,000, like I'm getting a BMW Z4 purple with like white leather interior. Okay. I mean, I know what I want.
I can get you a deal. My former business partner has been working for BMW for the last 20 years. So yeah, you let me know. Well, actually, I'll know because I'll see the sales kick in.
I'll come out to Minnesota, man. I'll take my Z4, drive it back to Top Gun.
Drive it back. Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe in the summer. Not doing that in wintertime.
Let me ask you this. So on kind of a bigger level, and there's kind of two questions here. One is, and I normally ask this at the beginning, of the show, and for whatever reason I didn't. But you had mentioned no. I love how these go. This is raw TV for me. This is I love this. When you think about writers who have influenced you, who is top of mind?
There's a lot. I mean, and the funny part is in my, like when I experience all these kinds of stories, right? And I get ideas from all these places, and I don't really think of like, oh, I get ideas from novels and that's what goes into what I'm doing. I get ideas from all over the place. Like the biggest influences are like Robert Kirkman wrote Invincible. The biggest, like Dragon Ball Z was a huge, Akira Toriyama was a huge influence. Babylon 5, which is a TV show by J. Michael Straczynski, was a huge influence, right? Rurouni Kenshin, because Rohan is basically Himura Kenshin, which I didn't even think about when I was writing the character, but I forget the mangaka's name, but that's another job. Tower of God is a huge influence in ways you don't see yet, but they have to do with things that are going to unfold in later books.
Cool.
A Korean comic a web comic that I have no idea what the manga's name is. I think it's a pseudonym anyway.
I'll ask Tori. Tori is my
Yeah,
go-to on all things Korean.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Tower of God. Jim Butcher.
Yeah.
I took a lot of the structural stuff and a lot of the, you know, I think there are definitely similarities between Rohan and Harry Dresden
Hmm.
in a few ways. Like, you know, I think the tone of I think our tones are very close.
Yeah.
Right? You got like a lot of joking around, a lot of funny moments, but some serious moments in there too. You know, you got that mix, and it's not the same, but I think it's very similar. So all those people have been huge influences on me.
You know, and that kind of like, I know when I read book 3, and let me ask you this too. Do you recommend I go right into book 3, or do I read the book 0 for next? Isn't there a book 0?
There's a short called Zero Twist. It's 15,000 words.
Okay. When do you recommend reading
You
that
can
in
read it
the order?
anytime. You
At
probably
any,
want to read it after Wistful Ascending, or I mean, anytime after having read Wistful Ascending, because it's
okay.
the story of how Rohan met Wei Li, and it's a short story and it has a punch. It's got a funny ending. It's not much to it.
Okay.
It was me having to write. It was, you know, it's the thing you give away to your newsletter, which I never really do. I don't really
Sure.
promote my newsletter or work on it.
Yeah.
I just don't, because I'm not a good business person. But I'd read that anytime after Wistful Ascending. It'll be fine. The Christmas Story you can read anytime after Return of the Griffin, and it'll be enjoyable. That's shorter. You know, the Most Powerful Christmas. Zero Twist is a cute. I like Zero Twist. It's not a look. Shorts are not my strength.
Okay.
Right? Like. I mean,
You need the time to develop what you want to do.
the things that I mean, okay. You know, if you ask me, the things I think I do well are like having to do with the plot and the development of the characters over the course of a bigger story, right? That's the part that if Dresden wasn't so annoying, yeah, I don't know. They're different. There are definitely differences, but I would read Zero Twist anytime. But you never have to read Zero Twist. There's nothing in there that's gonna like really help you understand later books.
Gotcha.
So
Well, I mean, I think that after I read book 3, or possibly when I do my wrap up of the quarter, I am going to bring up on my channel that it does feel a bit Dresden-esque in the sense of how the structure of the series goes. And I think, hey, that alone, anytime you can be in the same conversation with the Dresden Files, I think is going to perk people's ears up. And I wouldn't say that just because I know you. I would say that because I agree with you. I think structurally it does work like that. And you have a protagonist that is conflicted, that has kind of an odd past, that isn't exactly sure who's trustworthy and who isn't exactly. So there are some really comparable qualities, yet at the same time, it's very different. You know,
well, Rohan's less of a reliable narrator. And I always love when people pick that up. He's not a reliable narrator. Some
yeah,
people read the books and they're like, he's not very smart, but, and I'm like,
yeah,
he says he's not smart, but if you read the books, he's pretty smart, you know?
yeah.
Like, he's thinking 3 steps ahead of everybody else almost all the time. And he just pretends he's not, and he says he's not, but he always is. You can tell if you read him carefully.
Here's a question. I don't know if anybody's ever asked you. If they have, I apologize. How'd you come up with the name The Griffin?
Oh, I stole it. So there was this comic from DC, but it was like not set in the DC universe. It was like one of those prestige limited series they were doing, like a separate story. I forget the guy who wrote it. I don't even remember. But it was like 12 issues, and it was this whole storyline of this guy was like just a dude on Earth, and these aliens would come, and it turns out humans could be turned into superheroes using their technology. They would recruit a human or two, turn them into superhumans, like Superman analogs, right? And then they would use them in their military. And they'd fly off and they fight for this alien army. And then the storyline is this guy comes back to Earth and he's like been a superhero in space for like 10 years. But Earthlings it's our Earth, right? People on this planet don't know about this. And he like basically defects, comes home, and then the army, the Navy comes to pick him up. And there's a scene where this guy from Earth is like, mad. He flies up into space and he takes on an armada of spaceships with his fists.
Huh.
Okay, and
there you go.
The main character, the story was called The Griffin. The main character was the Griffin. Okay, and that was hugely like you can't not see the how I stole.
Right. Well, now that I know that, but yeah,
The character is very different. And that comic
yeah,
wasn't super popular. Like, I don't expect people to have
I've
read it.
never heard of it, and I know most
No.
comic books.
I
Yeah,
mean, it was like came out in like 92 or 94.
sure.
I have them. I still have the physical copy somewhere. I really like the comic. I'm not saying it was the greatest thing ever, but that visual of the guy, literally a dude with just like a shirt,
Yeah,
and not even like a spacesuit, going after like an armada of ships, and he couldn't even have laser eyes. It was just his fists and winning, and he's
that's
done, and all
cool.
these ships are just wrecked, like just littered through space in orbit above the planet. And they were like, we didn't even know he could leave the gravity well. I'm like, well, apparently he can, because he just kicked their asses. And so I just took it.
I think it's awesome.
I just took it.
One of the things I like to ask creative people, and you'd mentioned a couple of them as well. But what were your first feelings when you got some positive feedback from Wistful Ascending? What kind of went through your mind? Was it a validation? Was it? Do you remember anything specific or a
Yeah,
particular
yeah,
interaction?
yeah. So I told you, like, I've completed like probably 3 or 4 novels over the many years, and many first chapters. And
Yeah,
what happened is, around 2019, I was like, I'm going to write this book, and I'm going to publish it on Amazon, even if it sucks. That was literally my mantra, even if it sucks.
that's kind of how I started this channel. So I'm with you.
I'm just going to do it, and I knew I could get a cover for like $300, which I did. I got a cover for $300. Wasn't the cover now. It was the previous cover. I don't have a copy to show you, but it wasn't as good. But like I was like, I'm going to do it. Like, I didn't hire an editor. I just like proofread it myself. I didn't know anything, right? And I just released it, and a few people read it. So here, I kind of knew that like people who were like my friends would read it and be like, people who were into like the same kind of comics I was would be like, yeah, this is great, Joe, good job, because that's what your friends do, right? And that's fine.
Mhm.
But there's a few people who were like so an old friend of mine who was like a female who doesn't read like superhero like or comic book stuff. She reads like real literature. She's like, this is actually pretty good. And I was like, ooh, she thought it
Right.
was good. Maybe it's actually pretty good. Maybe I should really try. So then I hired an editor. I started taking classes. Like, I started watching like YouTube videos on how to write, like studying like people's essays on how to write. I watched, because Brandon Sanderson does this. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with he does a class at
I've actually watched 2 entire courses of him during the pandemic because I had these thoughts of, well, maybe I would write a book myself as well.
I
And
love those courses so much.
and they are really good.
I
But
love.
I think something that you alluded to earlier, that ideas are cheap, and that's where I come in. Is that I'm the guy that has all the ideas that would just like to find somebody to write them, because my writing skills, they're not there. Now this guy happens to have some writing skills.
Oh,
Hello, PL. I think the high rating with quiet
yeah.
reviews is good is indicative of how
Just-
good JCM series is. Can't wait to dive in. Sounds like pure fun. It absolutely is.
Yeah, I just finished the first book in the John Kingdom saga, whose name is escaping me because I'm not good with things like that. But it was really good. It was
Yeah.
really good.
Well, from what it's absolutely on my TBR as well,
Yeah.
particularly because I hear that PL is, his favorite author, one of his favorite authors is Janny Wirtz, which for me, I just read To Ride Hell's Chasm earlier this month, and it's hard to beat that kind of writing.
I read Words, the Mistress of Empire, the trilogy that she
Sure.
did with Feist when they
Yeah.
came out,
I've got it over here. I did a video about the authors that I've read the most of, and I was just floored that Raymond E. Feist was like number 3 or number 4. I've read like 19 of his books, and they were so long ago.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if it was Andrew or who said it on one of these programs, that their mind is like a sieve, and mine is too, because tell me that I read 19 books from one author, you think I'd remember more than the name of the main character, but yeah.
I must have read 30 or 40 Edgar Rice Burroughs books.
Yeah.
I read a handful of John Carter. I'm sure I read some Pellucidar, every John Carter, a bunch of Tarzan. Like, I don't know how many Moorcocks I've read. I have no idea. I read the whole. Anyway. You know,
that that
when you're old,
yeah.
it's really a lot of stuff.
So let me ask you this, because now we know Hybrid Helix is going to go on for a while. Do you see yourself expanding? Well, not expanding, but simultaneously jumping into another book during the Hybrid Helix?
So here's the thing: the Hybrid Helix books are hard, right? Because writing book 6, it has to work on its own, and it has to work as the 6th installment of a series, and in that way, it has to like advance a whole bunch of different plot lines and character arcs.
Hmm.
A lot of things going on to do that. So I got to a point where it's a lot of mental work. Like when I finished book 5, the rough draft, I was exhausted. Right? I was just like I was shot. So I found that I was trying to. That's one of the reasons I wrote Partial Function, because Partial Function was a much simpler storyline, a much simpler structure. The Partial Function is it's a fantasy novel.
I'm unfamiliar with it, so yeah, tell me what it's about.
Partial Function. It's imagine if the film,
Okay.
starred Michelle Yeoh, but it was set on Cradle.
Okay.
Okay, so this woman who's a retired monster hunter, one of the most powerful martial artists around. Her daughters are kidnapped, and she has this most incredibly powerful weapon that she's had in her possession that she inherited from her grandfather as a great master of martial arts. They want to trade it for her kids. So what do you think she's going to do? Is she going to trade the weapon for her girls, or is she going to use it to
Right.
righteous retribution on the men who crossed her? You get one guess.
I'm going to say she went with righteous retribution.
Yeah. So it's just like this woman tearing apart a continent. It's like Taken or John Wick, but it's Michelle Yeoh, and she has a dog.
Well,
I love the dog.
now I'm adding that to TBR Mountain as well. Thank you.
I wrote it because I wanted to win Spiffo with it. When I lost Spiffo 8, when I got eliminated, I was so crushed. And I was and I felt like it was partially because Wistful Ascending is not really a fantasy in the normal sense.
Sure.
It doesn't have a typical fantasy setting. I'm not saying that's why I lost. I'm saying that in my mind that didn't help.
Yeah.
So I'm going to write an actual fantasy novel. Gosh darn it. I'm going to put it in Spiffbox.
Sure.
Spiffbox 10, and I'm going to give it a shot because I want to win that contest really bad. And now it doesn't look like I'm going to have any, because the way they changed the entrance criteria, my chance of getting in are very small. But that's fine. It's fine.
Well, I mean, but that does kind of answer my question, in that, yeah, you did kind of expand out of that as almost maybe like a mental break too.
Yes. And that's the same reason I started Grim Dwarf, because Grim Dwarf is this another fantasy series, Partial Function takes place in the Hybrid Helix universe. Grim Dwarf does not. It's totally separate.
Cool.
But it's like every Grim Dwarf chapter is almost like its own self-contained story, and I release it once a week for free, and people can read it or not. But those are really like a chapter is a story, and almost like old style sword and sorcery.
I was going to say that sounds like Conan.
Yeah, more connected, but but yes, much more like Conan, much freer, much easier for me to write, which was the goal. So something to give me a chance to get some good stuff out there, but not be as taxing. So I actually kind of like mixing it up.
Okay, so you've got these different series going on, which I think is incredible. But at some point, you picked up the pen or you sat down at your keyboard to get started. I wonder, there's plenty of people that watch BookTube that are readers, but there's also plenty that are authors or would-be authors. What would you tell somebody who hasn't started yet, but is contemplating it? And, what are some of the pitfalls that maybe you've gone through that you would save somebody else if possible?
The first thing I tell people, which is not really maybe not the nicest thing or not the most popular thing, which is if you're not absolutely compelled to write, just don't. It's really hard. It's not really that rewarding, right? Like it's a lot of work. It's a lot of tears. If you have this story bursting out of you and you have to get it on paper, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't, if you're like, yeah, maybe I like to read a lot. Maybe I should write something. I don't know. Don't. Keep reading. Enjoy your life, right? Like,
the passion has to be there for writing that specific story.
Passion almost has to be a compulsion. And if it's not, save yourself the aggravation, or think really hard about what you plan to get out of it, because it's really hard. Writing a first draft is not that hard, but making it good is really hard. that's the first thing I would say is if you don't really feel compelled to do it, probably don't. But if you are compelled, that's great. I'm not saying that people shouldn't
Right.
write books. But the other thing you need to realize is that the biggest thing, the biggest obstacle, the biggest thing I didn't understand when I started doing this was, look, your first draft of your first few books is just going to suck. And I'm sorry, I don't care who you are. It's not going to be good. And if you write a book, if you want to write a good book, it's going to be your 10th draft, your first time through. Okay. And maybe after you've written for a while, you can scale that back. Right. But it sounds very personal when I say that, right? Like I'm talking to someone.
Right.
To anyone. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
It's hard. Like when Brandon Sanderson's books, that you read his 10th draft, you're not reading his first draft.
Right.
He talks about it. I mean, I'm not making this up. He talks about this. Like if you watch like his podcast or his interviews, he says this. He says people go through it over and over again. She tears out chunks. He rewrites it. You just don't get quality right away. You think you do because of the thing I described earlier. Remember I said you have this cool thing in your mind, and then you read the words you wrote, it reminds you of the cool thing you had in your mind. Well, yeah, but your words aren't actually getting that to the other person yet.
Yeah.
You get there. So then it's just a matter of studying the craft. Once you have a cool idea and if you feel compelled to write, you start writing. You find people who will tell you where it's broken, and that's really hard because your friends don't want to do that. Your friends are going to read your stuff. Your mom's going to read your stuff. My mom, not my mom. My mom will tell me it's terrible.
Right. That's New York mom, right?
New York Jewish mom.
Yeah. See, I have Minnesota Jewish mom. She's much nicer.
No, my mom doesn't believe in pampering.
Our mothers are opposite.
Yeah,
Let me tell you that. Yeah.
My mom is very much like your dad was all about unconditional love. That's not my style. That's an actual quote from my mom. So
yeah, so it sounds like we have opposite parents. Yeah. If I was going to write a book, it literally pooped on a page. My mom would tell me it's Charles Dickens level material.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, the first thing is recognize that if you have to do it, you have to do it. That's great. But then recognize that it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of revisions and a lot of process before you get to where you think you are at the beginning, right? Because you're not there. Just no one is. I'm sure there's some genius somewhere who's writing a great first draft, but like you're almost and people are like, oh, they hear about like the rules of writing, like you don't use passive voice, don't use a second person POV, with you. It doesn't work. But then N.K. Jemisin did it. It's like you are not N.K. Jemisin.
Right.
Sorry, right? Maybe one day you will be. Maybe someone listening to this is N.K. Jemisin level of talent. But probably not. Right? Probably no one listening to this can pull that off. That those rules are there for a reason. So look. Get people who will really critique you, follow those rules until you write some really good books, and then you can think about breaking them and you have my permission. But until then, those like guidelines you get, stick to them, right? Don't do crazy, weird stuff. Your first book, you can't pull it off yet. 10th book, 15th book, great. Maybe you can pull it off. I don't know who you are, right? I'm talking to a vague space. Maybe I think that level of talent, JCM. No, I'm not. I'm not that kind of writer. But that's fine. I don't aspire to be like I know what I'm trying to do, as a writer.
But I think for what you're writing right in your wheelhouse. I mean, I really do, and I noticed an improvement over from book 2 to book 1. I would assume that that's going to continue. You seem like the kind. I mean, you're a professional person in general. I mean, you have a professional career. You take what you're doing seriously, and like you said, you wouldn't do it if you didn't take it seriously. If you didn't have the compulsion to do it.
Okay. So there's another thing is I have friends who are writers who are like, I just want other people to read some of my books, and it's like, well, that's great, but I'm like, I want my books to be everyone's favorite books. Which is like a completely unreasonable goal, right? That doesn't really make sense. But I want everyone reading my books to put me right up there with like Jim Butcher and Jenny Wirtz. And when they talk about their 3 or 4 favorite writers, I want my name on their lips. Like that's my goal, right? So it's like, I don't, and if I never get, I'm not saying I'm ever going to get there, right? Like that's fine, right? But that's the aim, right? That's what I'm shooting for. So I'm always trying to improve the craft. And I have a really good line editor. So like, a lot of it's studying what she does. Like you get a line edit back, you can just kind of go, yes, 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 yes. But you want to really just, oh, cool. Thank you, Slay. Yes. That sounds awesome. I love
Slay is awesome. He's such a great supporter of the channel. Thank you, Slay. I'm looking right into the camera at you all the way. I know it's like 3:30 in the morning your time right now, but thank you very much for that kind super chat. You rock, my brother. You are just what a great human being and a huge supporter of the channel. And yeah, Slay, for sure. Read Wistful Ascending. I know what your tastes are. You're gonna dig it.
Yeah. So when you get line edits back, when you get feedback, really think about it. Really think about, why did I make this mistake? Why did this paragraph not work? And then really attack every page of what you're doing. Right. A big trouble I had early on was I had a bad case of the what's nexts.
Sure.
Like you just write what happens next, and then they had lunch.
Mm-hmm.
No one cares. They didn't need to have lunch, right? Like, did that advance the story? So you run into these. You got to really study. You listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I don't really take college courses in writing, but like I did the Brandon Sanderson courses. I listen to, like, when PL will do an interview, or when you talk to people. Like, I'll listen to reviews, or I'll listen to someone like you talk about what you liked and didn't like about a book, and that'll inform like how I'm approaching. Not that I'm writing a book that's going to please everybody, but I'll think of, they talk about pace a lot. Where am I going with pace? I mean, pace is probably one of my strengths.
Joe, what I think you should do is on your next book, book 6, just write it entirely for me. So if nobody else likes it, Brian's going to like it. So, you're going to win. You're going to get one positive 5-star.
6 is my homage to martial arts movies.
I can't wait to hear that.
My homage to martial arts movies. But it's going to be... and the other part of the problem is, you also get expectations, right? Like I'm at the point now where I have to have a big scene with the Ursins in every book, or people are going to get mad at me.
Yeah, they are the Russian-speaking bears.
They weren't supposed to be anywhere after chapter 3. That was never part of the original plan.
It's a fan favorite, so you got to do it.
I don't know. Yeah.
Well, we've been going for a while, and we'll probably start to wrap up a little bit. I want to share a couple of quick channel updates, and then I want to do something that we always do at the end of every episode of BellTube. So moving forward, next week, folks, we are off from For Whom the Bell Tolls. Why? Because my goal when I started this channel was to make 50 videos, and tonight is number 49, and Friday's video is going to be number 50. And next week, rather than doing a For Whom the Bell Tolls, I'm going to take a week off, and I'm going to instead release a video, something to the effect of what I've learned after doing 50 BellTube videos. And I think that there might be some content in there worthwhile for people. And normally how I think I'm going to be doing how these shows work is what seems to be working is 4 episodes simultaneously. So we do 4 in a row of Wednesdays. I take a week off, and then we go back and we do another 4. So that's likely what's going to happen. I have a tentative guest lined up for 2 weeks from tonight, but I don't want to say yet because it's not totally confirmed. But we also have some great guests coming up in May. And of course, like I said, if you're watching this on replay, please do leave a comment on where and when you're doing this. But as we finish every episode on BellTube, as you know, we have a One for the Road segment. And I can think of nobody better. And it was interesting because when I asked Joe if he would help us for tonight's One for the Road, he said he has a million One for the Roads. And after talking to him for an hour and a half tonight, I believe that. The man has just a lot of life experience, and he's got a lot of, varied experience, I guess is what I mean, in many ways, from personal life to professional life to family life and all of those things. So, Joe, if you would send us out of here tonight with a One for the Road.
So I think this is one that was probably more relevant in the past than it is today, but don't be ashamed to love what you love, even if it's crap. Okay. So I'm a superhero, like comic book guy from way back. And like, I went to college, I was studying philosophy, and people would sneer at you if you were reading comic books, or you were supposed to read great literature. You're supposed to read the good books or whatever. And like, you watch movies, and I watch a lot of Bollywood movies, and they're considered kind kind of lowbrow to a lot of people. It's like, oh, they have musical numbers, and oh, everyone cries at the end, and stuff. And life's too short, if you like, and if you don't like that stuff, that's fine. But if you like any of that stuff, if you like old kung fu movies, watch old kung fu movies and relish them, and put your whole heart into watching old kung fu movies. Watch them all. Get them all on Blu-ray. I don't know. Get them. Whatever
I absolutely love that, because I have felt that way to some degree with my passion for lit RPG. It has been sort of either ignored on BookTube or in some cases looked down on until very recently. But I have a huge passion for the genre. A lot of people think it is not really literature. I
Right.
strongly disagree. But I think your advice is super powerful and it's meaningful, because I think what it does is it enables people to be their authentic self, right? They're not doing what they think other people ought to think that they should like. They're liking what they like.
But you see it happen in so many arenas. Like, even I'm thinking of like food, right? I live near New York, right? There's a lot of really fancy restaurants around. And if you just like pizza, eat pizza. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to go to a French restaurant and eat snails. I happen to really like snails, but you don't have to eat. If you don't, if you want to drink fine wine, drink fine wine. But if you just like, whiskey and ginger ale, that's okay. Like, don't let people shame you into pretending to be something different. I mean, try a snail. I mean, you should try a snail, right? Like you should try fine wine. Right?
Sure.
It's worth trying. But if you drink your fine wine, you're like, I can go back to, Jameson and ginger ale. Do that. That's fine. It's good.
That is an amazing one for the road.
There you go.
Everybody, I want to thank Joe Byrne for being such an amazing guest tonight. I strongly encourage you to go pick up Wistful Ascending if you haven't read it yet. I happen to have it on ebook, or I'd be holding it up right now. But I think one's on the way to me, so that's good. There's some more of the books. They're awesome books, you guys. If you like fun, action-packed, funny, meaningful books that are accessible, that you're going to have a good time with, you're going to have a good time with Wistful Ascending. I wholeheartedly recommend the book. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Joe, thank you for being on tonight. You're everybody. You're everything that, a newbie host like me would like to have in a guest, that has something to say, and you do, and it's useful information. And I know people got value out of tonight. If it was just fun for them, if it was educational, whatever it is. And for the people watching on replay, Joe's great. He'll be back on the channel. I promise you guys. And everybody, you guys have a great night. I will be back with a couple of videos next week. I'll have a video coming out on Friday, and we will see you next time live when next the bell tolls. Talk to you guys later. Have a good night, everybody.
It's everyone in chat.